Alright, this is part 1 of lecture 3, Introduction to Surfaces. So to get started, go ahead and open up drawing 0201. And the first thing we're going to do once we get our Civil 3D drawing open is we're going to come over to our tool space, make sure we're in our Prospector tab, then we're going to go ahead and expand our Surfaces category. And then we are going to right click on our EG item and go into Surface Properties. Once you get the Surface Properties EG dialog opened up, go ahead and make your surface style is set to contours 2-foot and 10-foot background. Once that's done, we're going to go ahead and click the paintbrush here to open up our Edit Surface Style menu. So what we're going to do here is we're going to explore the different types of surface style properties. Starting with our information tab, we can see here we can have the name of our surface style edited to whatever it is we need it to be. Our description can change. Our created by can be adjusted. But like before, our last modified and our timestamps are non-adjustable. So once you've taken a look at that, go ahead and go over to the Borders tab. Here we see we have 3 primary border properties: 3D geometry, border types, and our datum. So under 3D geometry, we're going to see that our border display mode is going to be set to using surface elevation. And we have non-editable options for our flatten borders to elevation and exaggerate borders by a scale factor. That's because those are going to be predefined options if you use surface elevation. However, if we adjust that to either flatten our elevations, we see that we're now able to edit this field. Or again, if we use exaggerate elevations, we can then change our exaggeration by a certain scale factor. Under border types, we see both our displays for interior and exterior borders are going to be set to true, that way that they're visible. And then for datums, we're going to go ahead and by default have it set to false. Though if it were true, we'd be able to project grid to datum, define whether it's projecting grid to datum, and what our datum elevation is. And as we defined it in lecture 2, we know that our datum is our point of beginning or our reference point from which all of the measurements within this projection are going to be called from. Moving over to our Contours tab, we have several different properties here, including we can make adjustments for our contour ranges, our 3D geometries. We can have defined styles for our legends, contour intervals, contour depressions, contour smoothing. Moving on from that, we can go into our Grid tab. Again, we have 3 primary properties to look at here: our 3D geometry, our primary grid, and our secondary grid. And here I think it's important to note on the subject of grids are essentially Cartesian coordinate systems that store your elevations as properties versus actual values. In relation to GIS, grid would be similar to something like a raster, where we have our rows and columns, with stored values that we then visualize as a Z, versus a tin surface or actual 3D model or a point cloud. That Z value is an actual parameter of the point's definition. So it's a true elevation, not a representation or a valued attribute of elevation. And then jumping over into our Points tab, again, we have 3D geometry options. We have the ability to change styles for our point sizes and our point displays. We've already looked at a lot of methods for adjusting those on lecture 2, so we're going to not go too deep into all of that. Our triangles, so this is when we're talking about our actual tin surfaces, how these are going to be defined and styled. So again, we also see that we have the ability to change our surface elevation to flatten or exaggerate elevations, which open up certain editable attributes then. Watershed, we have a lot of different properties here. Let's go ahead and start off by defining what a watershed is. So watersheds are going to be areas that are going to contribute to surface water runoff to particular POIs or points of interests, sometimes also referred to as outlet points by engineers. And they're going to be relatively common products that are produced from topo surveys or site surveys. So think of it as a more specific type of surface. And again, we have a lot of different styling options here that we're able to adjust. So everything from our 3D geometry, our point size, our surface, our legends, what we want our boundary points to style as, our boundary segments, the depression watershed, the flat area watershed, and then if we have multi-drain sections, those as well. So it's just all of our styling for all of the different parts, essentially, of a watershed. I'll go ahead and look up an article that goes in a little bit more detail about watersheds for y'all, just in case you're curious, and I'll get that posted to Canvas. Let's go ahead and move on towards the Analysis tab. So again, here we have directions, elevations, slopes, and slope arrows as our properties that we're able to set and adjust. So different schemes, different grouping types, which from GIS 1 you should all be familiar with different group types. Elevations, slopes, and slope arrows. Again, it's just adjusting these kind of styling properties to kind of control how it is that we want our analysis results to look like. Onto the Display tab. Here we have all of our different layers that are going to be used by this surface. We're going to have the set colors for them. We'd also be able to control line types and scales and different view directions. So our 3 types of directions for our EG surfaces are going to be plan, model, and section. So going through these, we'll be able to see kind of which layers are set to visible or not immediately. So we know our plan, which is going to be our Cartesian view, is going to be seeing border, major contours, and minor contours on by default. But if we go over to our model or our 3-dimensional view, we see we turned off borders, major contours, and minor contours. We have our triangles turned on, so our triangles for our 10 surfaces. Then if we were to do a section view, we have a completely different list, which is only going to give us surface sections visible just with simple red coloring. And we'll get in more into section views later on during this practicum. And then always to top it all off, we have our summary tab, which is going to be all of the information we previously looked at in one single summary. This can be useful if you're having to kind of serves as a overview of everything that we have set. So for now, we don't need to make any changes. So go ahead and hit cancel just in case we did change anything. Then hit cancel on your other page. If we wanted to save those, we would have hit apply, OK again. And that concludes part 1, our introduction to surfaces and their styles. This is with data categories. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0202. Alright, then we're going to go over to our tool space in the prospector tab. We're going to expand our surfaces. And then this time we're going to expand our surface category EG. Then expand definition. We see we have different boundary definitions down here. So, different surface definitions, boundaries, break lines, contours, DM files, so on and so forth. Right now we're going to go ahead and right-click on boundaries and click add. And then go ahead and take a look at the different types of boundaries that we can add. So you're going to see here we have different types of boundaries that we can add. Outer, show, hide, and data clip. Outer boundaries are going to define the outer boundary of the surface. so that all the triangles that are visible inside it are visible, and then all the ones that are outside of that boundary become invisible. Our show boundary type is going to display all the triangles within a boundary that we create. The ideal here is to try to create a viewport or a view frame that we're going to focus on, and we're just going to look at that study area. Hide is essentially the opposite of that. It's going to create a hole within that reference block or that frame that you create, and it's only going to show our boundaries outside of it. And then data clip is going to create a surface boundary that's limited by a polygon object from the drawing, such as either 2D or 3D polylines, feature lines, figures, parcels, things like that. And it's important to note that unlike with show or hide, data clips can utilize more than one data clip boundary, so you can have multiple objects if that's going to be required for your specific project. So once you've reviewed those, you can go ahead and click cancel to close this dialog. Then we're going to move on to our break line definitions. So just like with boundaries, go ahead and right click break lines and then click add. And with break lines, we're going to go ahead and take a look at our types as well. We see we have 5 types here: standard, proximity, wall, from file, and non-destructive. So our standard break lines, they're going to be defined by selecting 3D lines, grading feature lines, 3D polylines, or splines. As to where our proximity ones, they're going to be defined by drawing or selecting a grading feature line, polyline, or spline in the drawing and within the extents of the surface boundary. It's going to utilize the X, Y, and Z coordinates of proximity break line vertices and determine those from the surface of 10 points that are within the closest proximity to the corresponding vertice of the break line. Our wall types are going to be defined using grading feature lines, 3D lines, 3D polylines, splines, or by specifying points. The wall break line is going to be stored as a standard break line, but defined differently in that you're going to have to provide offset sides for the entire break line, as well as elevation differences for each vertex for the entire break line. Our non-destructive break lines, they're going to use grading feature lines and open or closed AutoCAD objects. Non-destructive break lines are going to maintain the integrity of the original surface. They are not going to make changes. And then from file is essentially going to be importing break lines from whether it's going to be Vault or wherever else your organization may store those objects. It's also important to note that you're only going to be able to add break lines to 10 surfaces, and these are going to be really useful whenever you're trying to create section views. That's kind of the main purpose of our break line. Creating those accurate surface models, creating the accurate representations of things like retaining walls, curbs, tops of ridges, so on and so forth with our break lines. And that kind of forces the surface triangulation to respect that line, to respect that boundary. So go ahead and hit cancel again after you've finished looking over the break line types. Then we'll go on to contours. Go ahead and right click, click add. And again, in case you're not aware, contours, they're going to be the lines or the illustrations that kind of show us surface elevation changes on a map. It's one of the probably most common types of topographic map products we have is contour maps. It's a surface essentially that's created typically using 2-dimensional polylines, where kind of each unique polyline is going to follow an elevation across an area. So let me go ahead and pull one up real quick. All right, here we go. So if you've not seen a contour map before, here's a quick example of one. This one's on a military grid reference scale. So again, all of these lines here, it's going to be continuous interpolations of elevation across an area. And we can kind of see if we zoomed in, I don't know how high resolution it is, we can see we have elevation changes here being peaks, decreasing elevation along this route. And again, it's one of the most common forms of topo maps that you'll ever see. Contours. You're going to probably produce lots and lots of contour maps for site plans and things like that going forward in your careers as surveyors and drafters. And again, I think it's important to note that if you're trying to add contour data to a surface, that surface has to be a 10. Doesn't mean it's the only type of data that can have have contours added to it, but it is the only type of surface. And your primary properties here are going to be your weeding factors. And what weeding does is it reduces the number of points that are going to be generated along your contours. So kind of think about it as the level of resolution or accuracy that you may want along your contours. And that's going to be dependent on the data itself that's collected. How tight is your tin? So even though weeding does ignore both vertices that are closer together than the distance factor and the vertices that deflect less in angle factor, a large distance and deflection angle weeds a greater number of points. And then your supplementing factors, they're just going to look at additional vertices along your contours. All right, and once you've taken a look at all of that, go ahead and hit cancel, and then we will move on to DEM files. So right-click DEM files, click Add, and then you'll have this dialog pop up. So for these options, the first thing that we need to do is talk about what exactly a DEM is. So DEMs are digital elevation models, and they're kind of the opposites of TINs in the idea that a TIN is going to be a vector model, as to where DEMs are raster-based models. And something important to note on that is that because it is a raster model, even though it's going to contain X, Y, and Z information, that Z value is actually an attribute versus a point itself. But a benefit of DEMs over TINs is that they're going to provide a more regular grid-spaced interval of its points. It's going to be more ideal for reflecting larger areas and ground relief. And they're going to be pretty common if you're doing anything like hydrologic studies, transportation infrastructure, or pipeline studies. Typically, again, for large-scale project visualizations. So if any of you are working with older versions of Civil 3D, you might note that Spatial Data Transfer Standards, or SDTS files, were previously supported, but right now for Civil 3D 2025, they are only utilizing DEMs, primarily because this has become the standard for these types of file types. And then obviously the most important part is to add them. What you're going to do is click this icon right here, and then you would navigate to the location of your DEM to load into your project. Once you do that, all of the properties of that file would show up in this window here. But we don't have one of those for today. So go ahead and click cancel, and then we will move along to drawing objects. So right-click drawing objects, click add. Again, let's start by taking a look at our object type options. So we see we have points, lines, blocks, text, 3D faces, and polyfaces as our object types. And then for those, our points are going to be X, Y, and Z coordinates of objects used to define surface points. Lines are going to be the X, Y, and Z coordinates of object endpoints to define our surface points. Blocks are going to be the insertion points for our coordinates. Text is going to be the insertion point coordinates that are going to be used to define the surface point. 3D faces are going to be the coordinates of the object endpoints, and polyfaces are going to utilize X, Y, and Z coordinates for object endpoints as well. And then note, when adding lines, 3D faces, and polyfaces, you can maintain the original AutoCAD object edge faces as surface triangle edges. And also note, regardless of the type that you're bringing in, no matter what, it's going to import this as a point data. That's going to add it to the surface definition. But once you do load them, there's not going to be a existing relationship between the surface and that object. So it's going to bring it in to utilize its point. That point gets stored as part of the surface definition, but then the object won't actually be connected to it. All right, so once you've finished reviewing that, go ahead and click cancel, and then go ahead and right click on edits. And take a look at some of our options here, these different operations that we can do for editing our surfaces. We have add line, delete line, swap edge, add point, delete point, modify point, move point. We can minimize flat areas, we can raise or lower our surface, we can smooth surfaces out. If we had one copied, we could paste a surface over. We can create simplifications of our surfaces. And then, of course, we can always refresh our surfaces. So most of those edit operations are going to be pretty obvious in what they do, but I do want to talk a little bit about minimizing flat areas and smooth surfaces. So when we talk about minimizing flat areas, first, what is a flat area? So because these are going to be generated surfaces, there's always a potential for error. Sometimes what we see is we will have one of our 10 triangles actually be created from 3 points along the same contour line or the same elevation. And that creates a unrealistic flat area that should not actually be there. So it's an inaccuracy. And what this does, what this tool would do is it would automatically identify those flat areas and then break away from whatever its standard definition was for creating that triangle, and it's going to utilize points that are not going to be along the same contour to try to create a more realistic representation of that surface. And then smooth surface, what that's going to do, again, just because of the potential faults of a generated surface, we could end up with overlapping features or contour lines. Smoothing the surface is going to utilize some statistical methods, either natural neighbor or a creaking model, in order to kind of smooth that and prevent any kind of overlap. It is important to note that when you smooth the surface, the tool is going to create additional points that didn't already exist in your surface to allow those contour lines to be drawn without overlap. So that's about it for edits. Let's go ahead and move on to point files. So go ahead and right click, add, get the dialog open, and you'll see here that we'll be able to use this green plus button in order to add any point files that we want to our surface. From there, we're going to specify our file formats. As we've gone over a lot of these before, and again, if you have a file, you would get a preview of it right here. So it's pretty simple. It just adds our additional points, whether they were manually calculated or if it was data pulled in from our data collectors, to add to our surface. Once you're done looking at that, go ahead and hit cancel. Let's go over to point groups, click add. And again, you'll see we're able to add our point groups that we already have within our project directly to our surface here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take our ground shot points. Again, because when you're creating surfaces, you're not going to want all of your points. You're going to specifically want your topo points or your ground points. So let's click GS, go ahead and click apply, then OK. And then here you'll see we have our contours automatically generated. If they didn't automatically generate, go ahead and go into the command menu, type RE for regen, and then press enter, and then that will help your contours show up. So just like that, we've gone over defining surfaces with certain types of data categories and different methods for adding and editing the definitions of our surfaces. All right, part 3 is going to be control the display of a surface. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0203. Once you have that open, go ahead and come over to your tool space, prospector tab. I'm going to expand surfaces, expand EG, expand definition, and again, just take a quick review of all the different options under definition. If you need more information on each of these, you can go back and rewatch part 2. Alright, and once you've done that, go ahead and right-click on your EG surface and go into Surface Properties. Then we're going to want to go over to the Definition tab, and down here under our operation types, we're going to see we have point groups and add boundary. I want us to go ahead and select add boundary and click the white up arrow and move it all the way to the top. You'll notice you get this this warning essentially that there has been a change. This doesn't mean there's an issue, it just means that there is a change that has occurred, and you're going to get a prompt following this. So go ahead and hit apply, and then you're going to get this surface properties rebuild surface dialog. We're going to go ahead and want to rebuild this surface. So select the rebuild the surface option. Alright, then click OK. And then we're going to have this panorama view open up, and we're going to get a list of all of the errors that we have with our surface. For now, we're going to ignore each of these errors. We're going to go ahead and click our green check mark to close this view. Now let's go ahead and zoom into property 1. Excuse me, not property 1, but park 1. And something that we can notice is that we have these contour lines that are going to go through some of the buildings that we have marked up already on our map. And this is going to be a direct result of us putting our add boundaries over our ground shot points. So let's go ahead and go back to EG, right click Surface Properties. Under our definition, let's move that add boundary below our point group. Go ahead and just click OK. And then once again, we're going to need to select to rebuild the surface here. And as you can see already, now we had no errors pop up in our panorama view, and we do not have contours going through our structures any longer. And if you're wondering, yes, that would be an example of a hide. So we can come back down to our definitions. We can see we do have definitions marked as existing for boundaries and point groups. So for our boundaries, we do see we have a building type, and they are set to hide, and they will trim our contours where they try to pass through. You can see that's exactly what's happening here. Under this viewport, we do not have our surface within it, any changes within our surface. It maintains this as a flat area, and it's preventing our contours from coming through. If we come down to our point groups, we can see that we have our ground shots as the point group utilized to create our surfaces as well. So with that goes over a little bit of how we can kind of control the display of our surface, building on from some of the stuff we discussed in part 2. This is part 4, define surface boundary types. So building on what we did with part 2, where we learned about the definitions of our surface and our boundary categories, and then part 3, we looked at the impacts of display orders on our surfaces. Now we're going to look at the actual definitions of some of these boundary types and what they can do for us. So let's go ahead and come over to surfaces. e.g. definitions. Let's go into our boundaries, right click and select add. We're going to go ahead and name this boundary building, or BLDG. And then for our type, we're going to use a hide type. So that means it's going to remove all of the triangles within this boundary. So go ahead and then click OK. And then it's going to ask us to select objects. So let's go back into where we saw those buildings on part 3. So let's select some of these buildings that we see over here. Here we go. Once you got 4 or 5 of them, go ahead and click enter. And you see these boundaries automatically go into effect. So that hide function immediately is applied to our contours. And we no longer see our contours passing through these buildings, as well as we see them being trimmed where they do pass through. And this can be done with any kind of different boundary that you need to apply, whether we're looking at slabs or if we're looking at proposed corridors and the impacts that's going to have on our surface. We can create our objects and then apply the boundary rules to our surface that we need around said objects. So with that, that completes part 4. Alright, this will be a quick one. This is part 5, Access and Review Surface Statistics. So go ahead and open up Drawing 0205. In your Prospector tab of your tool space, go ahead and open up Surfaces. Locate the EG surface, right-click it, go into Surface Properties. Then over here in this dialog, go ahead and click over to the Statistics tab. And then you're going to see we have these 3 primary categories: General, Extended, and 10. So one of the things that you will immediately identify is this third category, where this one says 10. So we immediately know that this surface is a 10. If we had a grid surface, we wouldn't see 10, we would see grid instead. So right here, we can immediately identify the type of surface that we have. Going into it a little bit more, we can expand each of these categories, and we can see we have the basic kind of statistics and raw data information of our surface. Whether we're curious how many surface points that we're using to create this surface, what our min and max constraints or extents of our surface are, min and max elevations, or what our mean elevations are. All of that can be quickly located on the Statistics tab. And again, this is going to be your generalized information for the entire surface. So take it with a grain of salt. This isn't going to necessarily be the information that you're going to want to use for defining specific analyses or calculations. But it does do is it gives you a general idea of what this surface and the surface properties are going to be like. Obviously, if we see a huge change between our min and our max elevations, or if there's a really steep grade here, it's going to help us identify, okay, this is probably a lot of topography in this area, probably not too many flat areas. Number of triangles is going to help us identify, okay, yes, that's true. We see lots and lots of changes across our surface. If we had a small number of triangles, it's going to represent a generally flatter area. That means we're going to have larger triangles, most likely, obviously compared to the number of triangles to the total area of the surface. But again, it's just general statistics to give you a very quick idea or overview of what this surface is going to be like. So again, under surfaces, it's just go to your surface, right click, open up your surface properties, and come over to the Statistics tab. And with that, that is all we have to say for part 5. Go ahead and hit cancel and close your drawing. Alright, this is part 6, creating a 10 surface. So before we get on to creating a tin surface, let's talk a little bit about them. So tin stands for triangulated irregular network. And what it does is it creates a system of lines that form the triangles that are going to make up surface triangulation. So in Surface 3D, to create tin lines, what we're going to do is we'll connect our surface points that are closest together. And the elevation of any point in the surface is going to be defined by interpolating the elevations of the vertices of the triangles that the point lies within. These types of surfaces, they're going to be mostly useful for highly variable surfaces that have irregular distribution of sample data. That's going to be if we're talking about areas with lots of streams or roads or lakes. That's what we're talking about with irregularly distributed sample sizes. They're also going to be very useful for examining localized areas or large-scale maps. So while these surfaces do generally take longer to build and require more disk space than grid surfaces, they provide much more detailed representations of the surfaces that we're going to be looking at. And that's going to be because these tins are vector models compared to grid models, grid being rasters. So let's go ahead and come over here to surfaces. We're going to right click on surfaces and select create surface. So once you have your create surface dialog, we're going to see that we're going to be creating a tin surface. Our surface layer is going to be CTopo, and again, that's the default setting. We're going to leave it that way. For the name, we can go ahead and click in this field, and we're going to need to click this 3 dots, and then we're going to set the name for this surface to be EG. We can leave all of our other settings as default. Go ahead and click OK, and then click OK once again. And now we see over here, we do have our EG surface that's been created. Now you'll notice nothing was added to our map here. So if we come back over, if we right click on the EG surface we just created, go into its surface properties, we can go over to its statistics, and we see we don't have any statistics. So obviously we don't have any points yet. This is a blank surface that's been created so far, and we're going to need to work on adding our points to the surface in future parts of this lecture. But that's it for part 6 on the basics of creating a base tin surface. Alright, this is part 7, editing a tin surface. So go ahead and open up drawing 0207. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come over to the Prospector tab, and we're going to expand our surfaces, and then we're going to go into the surface properties for our EG surface. And we're going to want to go ahead and come down to our surface style. Let's click the black down arrow and then create new to create a new surface style. Now that we have this surface dialog opened up, we're going to want to go ahead and start on the information tab, and we're going to want to name this surface edit. Helps when you spell it right. We don't need a description or anything like that for now. Let's go ahead and jump over to our display. We're going to turn on visibility for our points and triangles components. Then go ahead and hit apply and OK, and then hit apply and OK on that next dialog as well. And then from there we immediately see our surface being regenerated on our display. So go ahead then and select your surface, and then you'll see this tin surface tab become available. Come over to the modify section, select edit surface, and swap edge. Now we're going to go ahead and come down to the bottom of our tin surface, so in this area down here. We're going to find points 587 and 555. Let's go ahead and click that edge between those 2 points. So immediately we noticed that that line, that edge, disappeared, and we had a new one populate here, coming from points 557 to 554. Now, if we go ahead and select that new line that just generated between 554 and 557, we see it's going to recreate that line from 587 to 555. And all that's doing is showing us how we can try to maybe come in and make manual adjustments to some of our 10 lines, our triangles. So once you've taken a look at that, go ahead and press Escape to exit the tool. So this time, go ahead and keep the surface selected, and under Edit Surface, we're going to pick Delete Line. And then once you have that selected, we're going to go ahead and delete all of the lines we have that are inside of our kind of 555 to 587, 714 to 587 triangle. Once you have that line selected, go ahead and press Enter, and we see immediately that this whole section disappears. We have these yellow lines kind of representing our new boundary showing up. Now, if we wanted, we could continue to select even more edges. You can see if we try to click on some of these lines that are not part of our tin surface, it's not going to find any. But that doesn't mean we can't come in and select just several different ones. It really doesn't matter which ones for the purpose of this exercise. Go ahead and click them. Once you're happy with it, go ahead and press Enter, and you see it kind of creates this new hole in the surface where we deleted everything. And again, this is just an option for you to come in and manually adjust your tin surfaces, kind of as needed. So with that, that kind of covers the basics of editing our tin surface. If we wanted to, we could continue to edit things. We can add lines back in, by selecting points to kind of recreate these surfaces that we deleted. But again, it's just simple ways to kind of create our new surfaces, and these yellow lines are going to represent changes to our surfaces as well on the interior. That's it for part 7. Alright, this will be the start of part 8, edit the properties of surface definition. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0208. Then we're going to go over to our Prospector tab in our tool space. We're going to expand the surface group. We're going to expand EG. Then we're going to right click on EG and open up our surface properties. And we're going to change our surface style from edit to contours 2-foot and 10-foot background. Once you've got that set, go ahead and hit apply and OK. You'll see our surface has adjusted from our tin visualization to our contours. Alright, once we have that, we're going to come back over into our Prospector tab. We're going to expand definition. Then we're going to come down to survey figures. Excuse me, not come down to survey figures. We're going to go into our map, and we are going to select 2 survey figures. So let's go ahead and take these lines that we have. You can pick any of them really. And once you have that, come back over into definitions, right click on definitions, on break lines under definitions, and click add. This is one location that we'd be able to add break lines and just as a refresher, remember break lines, they're the features that are going to force our surface triangulation to work around that line, implying there's no change in elevation along that break line. So again, things like retaining walls, curbs, streams, things like that. So in this dialog, we'd be able to input a name for our break line. We can set what type of break line we'd use and everything that we've kind of gone over before. But for now, let's go ahead and click cancel because we're not going to create a break line in this location at this time. So once you've got that closed, let's go ahead and go over to our survey tab in our tool space. Let's open up our survey database, and on survey, let's right click it and say open for edit. Then we're going to come down and we're going to click on our figures here. And we're going to see in our preview window, we have a list of all of our existing figures in our drawing. And you'll notice here we have a column for break line. So all these features are already defined as either being a break line or not being a break line. But we can tell by our contours here that it's not really respecting these break lines. So let's go ahead and work on implementing that. So coming back into our survey tool space, let's go back to figures. We're going to hit right click and then create break lines. And that is going to open up a list of all of our features, all of our survey figures that we have, and it's going to give us the option to again toggle whether or not that feature is a break line or not. And it's going to match what we saw down in our preview pane. So if we have EG set as our surface, we're going to go ahead and click OK. After we click OK, we're going to get this Add Break Lines dialog to pop up again for us. So let's go ahead and set our description value to survey. And then we're going to make sure our type is set to standard. Once that's done, we can leave all of our other default settings and click OK. So we're going to get this panorama view to show up, and it's going to give us a list of all of our potential errors that occurred when we were creating our break lines, and again the ability to zoom to where it thinks there's an error. But we can go ahead and click the green check mark to accept and dismiss these errors and zoom back out. Then in our tool space, let's go back to the Prospector tab, and we now see we have an option to expand our break lines. Here we have survey, and if we click on it right here, we can see a list of all of the break lines that we just added. Next, we're going to want to zoom in down here towards the corner of property 11, and then we're going to want to select the point marker between 525 and 537. It's going to be right down here. So select this line. Then on the Survey Point Contextual tab, we're going to go ahead and look under General Tools, and then we're going to select Properties. That's going to open up this Properties dialog. Go ahead and pull that out in the middle here. So I'm going to expand this so we can see a little bit more. So let's come over here and look at our description. We see there is no description yet for this point. Excuse me, I have the line selected, not the point. So let me get off that survey figure, come back down here, hit escape to clear our selection, and select the actual X point marker down here. Now we see we have survey point 382 selected, and then again under General Tools, click Properties. Now we have our raw description, which is what we were looking for before, pardon me. And then we see we have TOBBEG as that raw description. So that's going to mean it's the beginning of the top of a bank. So at that point we can go ahead and press escape to deselect our point, and then go ahead and close this properties dialog. Now let's go back into our tool space. Let's go to the Prospector tab, and then we're going to expand the point groups category. Then we want to right click point groups, and we're going to start working on creating a new point group. So let's change this name to TOB. And then we're going to go over to the raw description matching tab. And then we're going to go ahead and click the checkbox next to TOB, so top of bank. And now we know that this point group is going to include any point that starts with TOB. So let's go ahead and hit apply and OK. Now we see we have all of those points labeled. So once we have that done, we're going to want to come back to our surface, e.g., and under point groups, let's click that, right click, add, and then we're going to add our TOB here. Once you have that selected, go ahead and just click OK. Now we see down here in our preview window that top of banks are going to be included in our surface. So if we scroll out, we can see our tin was actually updated. Those contour lines are now respecting those top of banks, those break lines. If we want to just undo that really quick. Here we go. We can kind of see what it looked like previously. Well, I gotta reach in. Making more work for myself here. There we go. All right, and then we can go ahead and add TOB back in. We saw we had some adjustments over here as our contours came to respect the top of banks. All right, and with that, that is how we edit the properties of a surface definition. All right, this is part 9, creating a tin volume surface. So what we're going to be doing here, and what a tin volume surface is we're going to be comparing two surfaces in order to identify differences between them. And then when we're looking at differences in surfaces, primarily what we're going to be looking at is cut and fill volumes. So that's, again, if you're working on a project, how much needs to be removed, how much needs to be added, and how much earth can kind of be utilized within the same project to satisfy those cut and fill needs to create our corridors or our pathways. So let's go ahead and get started by opening drawing 2.9. Then on the Home tab, Layers panel, we're going to go ahead and click our layer up here, and we're going to expand that, drop list, and then we're going to select tin volume HID. So let's scroll down. It'll be right here. It's this magenta layer. It should be on and frozen. So let's click that frozen viewport to make sure that we have it visible, and then we can go ahead and select this layer. Now we're going to go ahead and zoom into the features that we just had show up around property 27. We can see them here. If we stay on our Home tab and we click on them, we can see that these are both a part of our tin volume layer. So we have those there. Then we're going to want to come over to our Prospector tab in our tool space. Then we're going to want to create a surface. So right click on surfaces and then hit create surface. Now in this dialog, we're gonna go ahead and set the name of the surface to work. And then we can go ahead and click OK. And now we see our surface down here in our view. So let's go back to our surfaces here. We can also confirm here that it is created. Then let's expand work and then expand its definition. And we're going to want to add a break line. So under surfaces, work, definition, right click on break lines and select add. And that is going to bring up our add break lines dialog. Let's go ahead and set this description to feet for feature. So make sure our break line type is still kept on standard. And then we can leave everything else as defaults and click OK. Now we need to select our two magenta features here. So 1 and 2 around property 27. Once those are both selected, go ahead and press enter. So we're going to add those to our new surface. And now what we're going to want to do is come back to surfaces and we're going to hit create surfaces from 10. Pardon me, I'm getting ahead of myself again. We're going to right click surfaces and just hit create surface. And then for our surface type, instead of leaving it on 10 surface, we're going to hit 10 volume surface. And then we're going to go ahead and set the name for this surface to vol or volume. And then we're going to click the base surface value field twice. So come down here, double click on base surface, or click the 3 ellipses if it's not opening automatically for you. Make sure we have EG selected and then click OK. And now we see EG as our base surface. Now we're going to want to come over one down to comparison surface. We're going to click those 3 ellipses. And we're going to use work as our selected comparison surface. Then once you have EG as your base surface and work as your comparison surface, you can go ahead and click OK to create this surface. Now we can see our 10 volume surface was created. Over here in the Prospector tab, we see our surface volume. We see it has a different symbol. That's going to be our 10 volume symbol. We can go ahead and expand that, expand its definition. Let's go ahead and go back to right-clicking on volume, opening up our surface properties for this volume. Let's go check out these statistics for it. So expand your volume category, and right here we can see we still have our base cut and fill factors along with all of our different volume statistics with this surface between EG and work. So one thing we can immediately identify from these statistics is that our cut volume is going to be much smaller than our fill volume, implying that this project to make this a level surface would require a lot of earth to be brought in. But that's neither here nor there for this exercise. It's just one way to quickly identify kind of the disparity between that surface, identify that it is a low area. We can go ahead and just click OK to close that surface property. Now with our volume still selected, let's come up here and open the Analyze tab. And then we're going to go ahead and click the Volumes dashboard to open up the volume dashboard. So this panorama view is going to show up for you. Once you have this, we're going to go ahead and click Add Volume Surface. So that's right here. So you can see it matches the symbol that we have over here in our tool space. Let's click that. Right now, volumes are only option, so we can go ahead and click OK. And now we can see our volume is showing up in our volumes dashboard. And right here on our net graph, we can see the green is our fill, and this tiny little red sliver is going to be our cut. So that small graph is another quick way to kind of visualize the statistics that we were already seeing when we were exploring our properties. So let's go ahead and hit the green check mark to dismiss this view. Let's come back over to our definitions for our volume surface. Let's go ahead and right click on boundaries and select add, so that we can add a new boundary definition. And we're going to go ahead and call this one feet as in feature. And then we're going to make sure we have outer as our boundary type selected. We can leave our other settings as defaults and go ahead and click OK. Once you have that, we're going to go ahead and select the outer line of the boundary the break line we selected earlier around property 27. So you'll see it highlights around those outer edges. Make sure you select the outer one. Go ahead and click that and then press enter. Make sure it selected it. So once it's selected, go ahead and press enter. Oh, excuse me. And then we'll see here under our boundary definition that we do have feet as our outer boundary now selected, with a default setting of yes for trim. And we can go ahead and reopen our volumes dashboard. Again, we see we still have our definitions, and we see we actually have some small changes to our statistics. Our cut actually increased a little bit more once we applied that boundary definition to our surface. But overall, nothing major. So once you've identified those changes and how applying that boundary helped refine our project, go ahead and click that green check mark to dismiss that view. And with that, we've completed part 9, creating 10 volume surfaces. This is part 10, and today we're going to be working on creating surface labels. So go ahead and open up Drawing 210, and then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our Annotate tab up here. Then we're going to go to the Labels and Tables panel and click Add Labels. So Annotate, Labels and Tables, Add Labels. Then we're going to go ahead and select Surface and Add Surface Labels. We'll get this Add Label dialog to show up for us. Let's go ahead and confirm that the feature is set to surface, and then we're going to go ahead and select Spot Elevation as our label type. Now you should be seeing elevation only as our label style, as well as basic circle with cross. Once you see that, go ahead and click Add. And then you're going to be prompted to select a surface. So go ahead and press Enter. And then that's going to give you a list of all of our existing surfaces already in our drawing. So we're going to make sure EG is selected, and then we're going to click OK. Now you're going to be prompted to select a point. So first we'll go ahead and zoom out, and we'll identify one of the more flat areas in the eastern part of our drawing. So we can come over here. Let's see, which point do we want? go ahead and just select a point kind of right here in this kind of flat area. So click there and we immediately see we have a label with that elevation in this kind of flat area that's automatically created. Now, if we go back to our Add Labels dialog, we can go ahead and change our label type to slope. And then once we've done that, we can confirm that the slope style is going to be set to percent. And then let's go ahead and click Add. And then again, we're going to be asked for a surface. Go ahead and press Enter. Again, we're going to use EG as our surface. Go ahead and click OK on that. This time, we're going to be asked if we want to do a 1-point or a 2-point slope. We're going to go ahead and type a capital O for 1 point. Then go ahead and press Enter. Then we're going to be prompted to pick a point. So let's go a little bit below our previous label that we just created. Let's click down here. Then immediately we see a 1-point slope generated between these two contour lines on that point. Let's just go ahead and do that one more time. We'll keep our surface slope percent settings set. Go ahead and click Add. Again, press Enter. We're going to do EG one more time. And then we're going to continue to do a 1-point slope. Let's go ahead and place it over here on the other side of the contour that we just created that other label. Let's click that. And now we can kind of see what that slope looks like in the direction that it's moving, kind of between points 560 and 561. And then one more time, we're going to add one more slope label. Again, we're going to press Enter. We're going to leave it as EG. I'm going to say OK. This time, we're going to type in T to set a 2-point slope label. So let's click right next to where we had our second 1-point label, and let's kind of come all the way down, a little bit further this time, and let's select a second point. Once you've selected that second point, you'll see that we now have that larger slope for that entire range instead of just at that single point. And the important thing to note is the difference between our 1-point and our 2-point labels is 1-point slope labels, they're going to calculate that slope on that triangle face exactly at the point in which you clicked it. As to where our 2-point slope labels are actually going to be calculating, or obviously going to be calculating slopes from our beginning point to our end points and along those contours. So it's going to take into consideration more than one triangle face, and as well as our surrounding points. That's going to be the major difference between those two, and they both have their purposes. At this point, we can go ahead and close our Add Labels dialog. And again, hit Escape to exit our tool. And then once you've finished kind of comparing these different labels and the difference between 1- and 2-point slopes, that'll conclude part 10, creating surface labels. Alright, so this is the start of part 11, add contour labels. During this exercise, we're going to be going over how to add contour labels to our surfaces. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0 to 11. Then we're going to go ahead and come over to the Annotate tab up here. And we're going to go down to Labels and Tables, and then we're going to select the Add Labels drop-down. And then here, we're going to need to go into our Surface menu, and then go to Add Surface Labels. So we'll have the Add Labels dialog open up here next. And we're going to make sure that our feature is set to Surface, and we're going to need to change our label type to Contour Single in that drop-down menu. Then you're going to see all of these other label style settings become available to us. We don't need to change any of them right now, but just so you know, we are able to make adjustments to our major and minor contours and then any user created contours. So go ahead and click Add from here. And then when prompted, you'll see down here that we're going to be asked to select a surface. So go ahead and press Enter. And that's going to open up a dialog for us to select a surface from our drawing. And we're going to want to select EG as the surface that we're working with here. If EG is selected, go ahead and click OK. Next, you're going to be prompted to select a contour line down here. So let's go ahead and zoom in on our drawing to where we were creating our surface labels in our previous exercise. So go ahead and scroll in and select this contour line right here in the middle of the -5.9 2-point slope. So as soon as we do that, we see we have 184.00 open up. That is going to be the elevation along this contour line. But again, that's only adding a single label as we had selected in our Add Labels dialog. So this time, let's go ahead and come back to the Add Labels dialog. Let's change contour single to contour multiple. We're going to go ahead and leave all of our label styles the same again and click Add. We're once again going to be prompted to select a surface, so go ahead and press Enter to open up that surface dialog. Make sure EG again is selected and then hit OK. And then once you have that, go ahead and select a point down here on this contour. And you're not going to need to select a point directly on the contour, just make sure you're kind of above this one and below the 184 label we just created. So click that. You're going to see it's going to ask you to then select a second point. So let's go ahead and go past our first major elevation and go just a little bit past our second major elevation, kind of click close to that 571 point. So once that's clicked, we can go ahead and hit Enter to end the process. And we see along that line that we just created, we had elevations at every single contour it crossed. So that's going to be a quick way for you to add multiple contours kind of in a neat and organized manner. If we tried doing that, single contour at a time, we might not have the kind of visual presentation that we want. We might get a little bit, left, a little bit right as we move up and down these contour lines. So here you can kind of see there's a bit of a wiggly curve going on, even though I just kind of quickly did it, versus our multiple contour lines being a nice kind of clean line of labels. Let's keep focusing on our multiple contour label here. So if we click on this, we see we have a few grab points. We have our start and our two endpoints and our midpoint. Let's go ahead and grab our first point that we put down on our contour label line. And you can see we can adjust it as we want to new locations. And you get a representation of what those labels will look like if we were to move it. If you grabbed that midpoint, you'd be looking at moving the entire line without changing any of its angles. So again, that's a quick way to quickly move these, clean these lines up if you needed. You can extend them, you can shorten them, kind of as needed depending on where you may have put it originally and kind of where you decide you want it in your final product. And then just to kind of continue exploring our options here, let's go ahead and also do a contour multiple at interval. Again, we're going to leave all of our label styles as our defaults. Then we're going to go ahead and click Add, hit Enter, and then select our EG surface one more time. Click OK, and then it's going to ask us to pick our first point. So we already know we're going to have multiple points showing up on this interval. So let's go ahead and just kind of click up here near our slope labels. I'm going to drag it down towards this feature down here, kind of close to 0.571 as our second point. And now we're going to be prompted to see how many intervals or the interval along our contours that we want labeled. So let's go ahead and put in 150 as our interval, hit enter, and now you see we have everywhere that this line crosses our contour multiple to interval line, we have every 150 feet a contour label showing across the entirety of that contour line. So that is going to allow you to label things instead of just along a specific line or a specific point, but across the entirety of that contour line just with one simple tool. And just like our previous multiple contour line label, we're able to select this line and we can use these grips and we can adjust it to kind of show wherever it is that we would like. So that way if you have to make adjustments post initial creation, you'll be able to do that just fine. So those are our three primary ways of labeling contours. We went over contour single, which is doing spot elevations, contour multiples, which is putting individual contour labels along a line, and then contour multiple at intervals. And that's going to be, again, doing our labels along a line, but it's going to apply those labels at a designated interval across the entirety of that contour line. And with that, that concludes part 11. All right, moving on to part 12, using the surface analysis in Civil 3D. We're going to go ahead and start by opening up drawing 0 to 12. And then we're going to go into our tool space and make sure we're on our prospector tab. And then we're going to expand the surface categories. So once we have those expanded, let's go ahead and right click on our EG surface and we're going to open up surface properties. Once you've done that, go ahead and come over to the Analysis tab on the Surface Properties dialog, and then we're going to choose Contours in the Analysis tab drop-down menu, and we're going to go ahead and set some ranges. So here in our Ranges option, we're going to go ahead and increase that value to 5. And then we're going to click this white down arrow to execute or run the analysis. Let's expand this dialog a little bit. You can see here we now have our 5 ranges showing up in our analysis window. And then like with anything, we're able to stylize these as needed. We're able to come in and we're able to adjust our line types, our line weights, and our line colors, both for our major and minor contours along these ranges. And what these ranges are going to do is they're going to offer you a way to quickly visualize changes or kind of groupings of our ranges on our maps. So think of that as a think of it as a equal interval graduated color classification as you might do in ArcGIS Pro. So imagine we have these 5 here, but maybe we want to increase our equal interval classifications to 8. So go ahead and change that number to 8, click that Run Analysis tool, and then we now see our new sets of 8. One of the first things that you're going to notice is some of these colors, they're pretty similar to each other. You know, this red and orange are going to bleed into each other, these 2 greens, and we're at 8 ranges. And if you recall, NGIC 1477 was kind of that sweet spot for our number of classes whenever we are doing classified symbology. But for now, and then for the sake of having an even number, we're going to go ahead and leave it at 8 as we continue on this exercise. So let's go ahead and widen this a little bit more as well. Then we can come over here and select our legend, and we're going to go from our analysis type from contours over to elevations. And we're going to go ahead and leave it on 8 ranges like we had previously. And we can see here the color scheme that we're going to have assigned to those ranges. So if we turn on this preview, we can see what this table would look like if it was output, as well as, if we want to play with it, here we go, as well as that legend included in it. So pretty helpful if you just need a quick look or preview of what your information is going to look like. Now let's move on from elevations to slopes. Again, we're going to keep the same number of ranges consistent among all these different analysis types. We're going to see red is the default scheme here. If we double click on these, we can change it if we wanted, but again, that's up to you. Typically the defaults are going to be sufficient. Moving forward from slopes, we can go into our slope arrows. Again, we're going to keep it as 8. We're going to run that. We have a defaulted rainbow scheme that applies to it. And let me kind of come over. Once we apply it, we'll see some changes occur. After that, let's go to our user-defined contours. Again, 8. Run our analysis on that to generate it. There we go. Here's our preview loaded up. Again, this one, because they're contours, we're going to have the option to not just change color, but change our line types and our line weights for each category if we needed to, or each class. Go to our watersheds. Go ahead and default that up to 8 as well. Excuse me, we can't adjust this yet. Just run it as its default of 0. And then here we see watersheds, unlike our lines or our spot, our points. We're actually looking at areas. So we're going to have options to apply different hatches and hatch colors as well to each of our ranges that are going to be generated for us. Oh, and again, why we don't typically adjust this value ahead of time is because we don't want to accidentally merge depressions together where they kind of shouldn't be, where they don't naturally exist. So leaving it at the default 0 is going to allow it to maintain the integrity of that surface. So that's a quick overview of the analysis tab of our surfaces. And how we'd be able to quickly apply different symbolization to all of our different analysis types. But for now, we're not going to be saving any of this, so go ahead and click cancel. And that is going to complete part 12 of using the surface analysis dialog. Okay, this is part 13, setting analysis parameters for our surfaces. Go ahead and open up drawing 0213. Then let's come over to our tool space, go into our prospector tab and expand our surfaces. Then we're going to go ahead and right click on our EG surface and select surface properties. Then we're going to make sure we're on our analysis tab, and then we're going to go ahead and change our analysis type to slopes. So in the analysis tab drop down menu, and then make sure our ranges are going to be set to 5, and then run that analysis. Now we can see we have we've gone from 3 to 5 ranges for slopes. Then let's go ahead and click over to the statistics tab in our dialog and expand our extended option. Here we can see our min and max grade slopes going from 0% to 433.43%. Now, if we go back to our analysis tab and we look here, we see our minimum slope for our first range is 0%, and then our maximum slope for our fifth and final range was 433.423, matching what we saw on our statistics tab. But maybe we're not too happy with that, so let's go back up to our maximum slope for range 1. We're going to double click it. And then we can actually change that from the defaulted equal interval to a user-defined range of 10. And then we see there wasn't a change to the minimum slope on 2. But what we're going to do before adjusting this minimum slope, we're going to go ahead and adjust our maximum slope up to 50. Because if we had adjusted our minimum slope first to something that was below 9, I'll show you what happens. If we did our minimum slope first, we'd run into this error because our minimum is now higher than our maximum. So again, make sure you always adjust your maximum slope first and then your minimum slope second. Do note it's not auto-adjusting any of these for you. Which kind of gives the user a little bit more control. Some tools like ArcGIS Pro, they're going to try to automatically refine these as you go. Sometimes it reset values that you don't want changed. So having this user control, again, it puts the onus on you to make sure you're not making any mistakes. But it is nice having complete control and the software not trying to tell me what I'm doing. So again, we'll do 125 is our max slope for 3. Adjust that minimum to 50. And then max slope for 4, we'll go ahead and put 250. Minimum slope, again, it's going to be the maximum slope of our previous at 125. And then here for range 5, we'll set that minimum slope to 250. We can do that one right away because it's not exceeding the maximum slope we have overall for all of our slopes for our range. And that's going to be how we're able to kind of set analysis parameters for surfaces. We could have done this for any of our different analysis types, but we just did it for slopes. This time, go ahead and hit apply and OK. And then if you look, we're not actually seeing any changes here, and that's because we don't have any analysis slopes currently visible on our drawing. If they were visible, then we would have seen those changes as we hit apply and OK. So with that, that is the end of part 13, setting analysis parameters for surfaces. This is going to be part 14, performing a surface analysis. We spent the last couple of parts talking about how we can adjust parameters, classification methods, and symbology for analysis. So let's go ahead and actually perform one this time. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0214. And then let's come over here to our Prospector tab, expand our surfaces, right-click on EG surface, and then hit Surface Properties. Once you have that open on Information, on the Information tab, come down to our Surface Styles. Go ahead and hit this black down arrow for our edit, and then we're going to select Create New. And that's going to open up our surface style dialog for a new surface. So we're going to call this surface on the Information tab. I'm going to go ahead and call it Slope Analysis. Then we're going to want to go back over to our Display tab, and then we're going to make sure we turn on, the borders and slopes. We see here we have borders, it's already turned on as visible. Let's scroll down to slopes, it is not. Let's adjust that to be visible. Alright, then we can go ahead and just hit apply and OK, maintaining all of the default symbology for those two layers. And then here on our surface properties dialog, we can go ahead and hit apply and OK as well. Now we see right here we have our slope analysis visible, and we can see a lot of this is just this solid red color. So if we're curious what that range is, we can go back into our surface properties as we've done before, go into analysis, and then change our analysis type to slopes. We can see that's our 0 to 10% range. It means the overwhelming majority of our surface is going to be in that 0 to 10 range, and that's not really a good representation or visualization of our data. So we're going to go ahead and make some changes to that. And the quickest way to do that is we're going to get past this user-defined interval that we liked before, and we're going to go ahead and click Run Analysis, and then let it use its defaults for us. So if we hit Apply, we now see we have a more even distribution of our surface triangles in each range. So again, in case you don't remember, that classification method is referred to as quantile classification, where we're trying to maintain an even number of features within each of our classification, each of our classes. So fun little facts there for all of you. So once you're done with that, again, just click OK. Or if you're curious, you can stay in that window, and on slopes, because we didn't get to see it before, we can make some adjustments to this. I'm just going to pick some random colors here, so it's going to look like rainbow vomit or something for us. It's going to be really exciting, trust me. Cover your eyes. Hit Apply. There you go. It looks like Mardi Gras. It was unintentional, but I love it. So in case you were curious what it actually looks like when we make those adjustments. So again, that's not necessary for you to do, but just so that you know, because we actually have this analysis set to be visible, we get to see those changes this time, unlike in the previous parts we've gone over. And with that, that is as simple as it is to perform a surface analysis. The only thing that we were missing before was turning on the visibility for those analysis to show. All right, that concludes part 14. Go ahead and close your drawing. It's going to be part 15, creating feature lines. Go ahead and open up drawing 0 to 15. And you'll see a surface, a slope surface, very similar to what we had created at the end of part 14. So let's go ahead and go over to the Prospector tab in our tool space. We're going to expand our surfaces, and then on EG properties, you guessed right, we're going to go into our surface properties. So once you have that dialog open, go ahead and click over to the Information tab. And for our surface style, we're going to change it from slope analysis to contours, 2-foot and 10-foot background. We're going to use the defaults. Go ahead and hit Apply and OK. You immediately see our slope surface is no longer visible, and now we're seeing a contour visualization. Once you're at this point, go ahead and click over to the Home tab, and then we're going to go over here to our Create Design. We're going to go to the Feature Lines section, and we're going to hit Create Feature Line in the drop-down menu. It's going to open up our Create Feature Lines dialog. Here, what we're going to do is first make sure that we have our name checked so that we're able to give it our own name. But we are still going to just keep that default name for all of the lines that we create. You notice here at this point, we would be able to adjust our styles, which layer it is that these lines are going to be created within, and then depending on other selections, we have a few other conversion options. But we're going to leave everything here as default for now, so go ahead and click OK. Now we have our option to start creating feature lines. We can see kind of if we move our mouse around, we have a lot of different snap points that show up. But if you're curious how you adjust those, we're going to go ahead and come down here to this square with a little snap node in the top corner, and we're going to click the drop down arrow next to it. And this is going to open up our different snap options. And we're going to want to come up to node and make sure that we have node selected. If we want, we can go ahead and also turn off extension and nearest at this time, as well as center. So we'll only have endpoint, node, and intersection snaps turned on while we're trying to create these lines. So let's go ahead and then zoom in down to the southwest corner of property 11, and we're going to locate point number 369. So that'll be right here, just to the west of that, just northwest of that southwest corner of property 11. And then we are going to want to select point 369. We see we can go ahead and snap to the edge, or to the center of this point here, if we just kind of come anywhere around it with our cursor. So let's do that, and then we're going to get prompted to specify an elevation. So we're going to go ahead and put 190.904, which we know shouldn't be too much of an issue because we see point 369's top of bank is already 190.90. So once you've done that, press enter to accept your elevation. You now see we can go ahead and select a new point. So we're going to scroll or zoom out a little bit and then come just a little bit southeast down to point 383. And we're going to select the center point of 383, and we're going to specify, specify the grade now for the second point to be negative 1.12. Once you've done that, go ahead and press enter to accept that value. Now you might have noticed, actually if we go back, when we selected that point, it did by default give us negative 1.12 as that grade, and how it calculated that is it just knows that that is the grade of the change in elevation that we're looking at from point 369 to 383. So if we want to customize that, we could, but in this case, we're still looking for that default value. So if you went back like I did, go ahead and press enter, and then you're going to be prompted to select a new point. At this time, we're going to go ahead and click through several points, and we're going to accept all the default grades as we go along. So let's start with 382. When we're doing that, make sure that you're actually selecting the node and not the endpoints of the contour line near it. So there we go, we got 382, then 381, then 380. Again, selecting our defaults as we go along. 379, 378, 377, and last but not least, we're going to select 376. So you press enter for that last default, and then instead of selecting a point, we're going to go ahead and press enter, and that is going to finish this tool of creating this feature line. So now that we have that feature line created, let's go ahead and pan to the south lines of parcels named Park 1 and Property 2. Excuse me. So again, if we zoom all the way out, it's going to be that area up here. And then this time, instead of using the windows up here, we're going to type in the command PL, capitals, for polyline, press enter, and now we're going to be able to start specifying the points to draw this feature. So let's pick this kind of southwest corner for Park 1. So again, we see that it's up here. And then we can zoom out and we can come all the way over to Property 3, and we're going to pick that southeast corner, so all the way on the far end of Property 3. So select that endpoint. And then instead of selecting an additional point, go ahead and press enter to finish the creation of that polyline. And you'll notice we have a polyline now created from that corner to this corner. So we've now created two different features, two different feature lines. And let's go ahead and go back to this second polyline we created. We can click on it, or really it's the only polyline, the other one's a feature line. We can click on it and we see we have kind of three grips here. Now if we grab this middle grip, we get an options to stretch, add vertex, or convert to arcs. So let's go ahead and hover over that, and we're going to hit convert to arc. Then we're going to go ahead and press and hold the shift key. Oh, excuse me. Press and hold the shift key and then right click in your drawing space. And that's going to open up our ability to pick where we want to snap to. We're going to go ahead and click perpendicular. And then we're going to come over here to property 2. And we're just going to pick a point along this south line. And that's going to automatically identify that perpendicular point for us. So now we see we've created an arc, or changed that simple polyline to an arced polyline, following Park 1, Property 2, and Property 3. And we were able to utilize our perpendicular snapping methods to improve the snap location that we wanted the midpoint for that arc to be at. But again, this is a polyline, not a feature line. So if we wanted to convert this to a feature line, what we can do is come back up on our Home tab under Create Design, click that drop down for feature lines, and we're going to go ahead and create a feature line from an object. As you can see here, the objects that we can utilize would be lines, arcs, polylines, or 3D polylines. And a 3D polyline is an object, and conveniently we just created one of those. So let's go ahead and click that. That is going to open up our prompt to create feature lines. And then from here we're going to go ahead and just click OK with these default parameters. And then we see we now have a green line here instead of a white line. What that is it converted our selected object already to a feature line. Now, let me go ahead and undo what we just did. There we go, back to a white line, so we know it's an object again. Imagine we didn't have this object pre-selected. Let's go ahead and click the feature line, create feature lines from objects option one more time. And this time, instead of that prompt, we're going to see it's going to ask us to select first. So let's go ahead and select that object this time, since it wasn't pre-selected for us. Now, once you have it selected, go ahead and press enter. And now you see that prompt open this way. So the difference between the two ways we just did that is the first time we had our object already selected for us to create that feature line from. The second time we didn't have it selected, so we had to go through the prompt to select it first, confirm our selection, and then it opened up the create feature lines dialog. So once we're at this point, go ahead and check name and check style. And we are going to leave the name as defaulted as it is and the style defaulted at basic feature line. But once that's done, go ahead and click OK. And now we see we still have that same color, but if we go into our feature lines section here, we'll actually see that it's created with its proper name, feature 3. Feature 2 being the one we originally created over here. So with that, that concludes part 15, creating feature lines. When you're done, go ahead and close out your drawing and we'll move on for part 16. This is the start of part 16, editing horizontal data and feature lines. During this exercise, we're going to learn again, obviously, how to edit data for feature lines in the surface and grading categories. So go ahead and open up drawing 0216, And the first thing that we're going to want to do in our drawing is we're going to select the feature along the top of bank that is south of parcels or properties 11, 12, and 13. So we can see that feature here that we created during part 15. Go ahead and select that feature line. And that is going to load the feature line contextual tab up here. So once that's there, go ahead and locate the Insert PI option under Edit Geometry and click that. And now we're going to again be asked for an input to insert our feature point of interest. And if we move our cursor along our feature line, we can kind of see what that might create as we go along. So what this is doing is it's actually going to be creating new faces for us to extend these feature lines and allow changes to our surface as we go. But for now, we're not going to actually make any changes, so go ahead and hit Escape. And then on our Feature Line Contextual tab, let's actually go back to Delete PI. Once we have that, let's go ahead and come around point 381. And then we're going to be asked to delete a specific point. So let's go ahead and pick 381. Go ahead and click it, and you see that removed that vertex from our contour along point 381. So was that contour change? If we didn't see it, we hit Control Z to go back for you. You see we have it here originally. And then when we delete just that one point, you see our feature line moved up here. So 381 is no longer included in that feature line. And if we want, we can go ahead and click Insert PI. And then again, between points 382 and 380, we can see we can extend that feature line back down to point 381. Put it back to its original state. Go ahead and click Escape at that time. And if we zoom out, we see we didn't actually save it because we hit Escape. Now, if we had clicked Enter, it would have accepted our changes and gone ahead and closed it out. So let's look at that one more time. We hit Insert PI, select our object, bring it down to 381, and then accept that elevation point and hit Enter. So again, that's how we can put them back in and remove them all kind of easily in the same way. Go ahead and hit Escape to make sure you're not under any existing tools with that PI at 381 removed. Now what we're going to do is, instead of inserting or adding, we're going to insert a break in our feature line. So that's going to be up here. It's that top left option under Edit Geometry next to Delete PI. Let's go ahead and scroll in, and we're just going to pick a point here on our line, and then we can pick a second point just a little bit a ways from it. Now you see we have a break in our feature line. Not only do we have a break in it, but if we come over to our Prospector tab, click on Feature Lines, we see there's now a third feature here. So this now has become Independent Feature Line 2, and now an unnamed feature line here because we did not give it a name. Now you see we can adjust our feature point here via snap. So if we grabbed this point and we drug it on to connect to the endpoint of the third feature line that was created, we know that they're going to share a common endpoint, but we can see here they still are going to be two separate endpoints, or excuse me, two separate feature lines. So what do we do if we wanted these to actually just be one? Well, if we have a break option, unsurprisingly, we also have a join option under Edit Geometry. So let's go ahead and select Join. It's going to be this symbol up here. It's the two endpoints with the dot in the middle. So We already have one selected. Let's go ahead and select the second line that we're trying to connect to. And then let's go ahead and press enter and view our results. We now see, and we know if we click off of it and then select it again, it selects the entire object. And over here in our view on our prospector tab for feature lines, we see that third unnamed feature line has gone away and we're back just to feature one. If we were paying attention, we would have noticed the 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional links adjusting as we went along. This time, let's go ahead and click escape. Then we're going to go ahead and run the create polyline command again. That's PL and then enter. Just in this kind of same area, we need to draw a line that intersects feature line 2 for us. To do that, select a second point. All that matters is it crosses it. Go ahead and press enter to say we're done. What we're going to do now then is reselect our feature 2, and under that contextualization tab, we're going to select the trim feature. So go ahead and click that with your feature line already selected, and then you're going to be prompted to select your cutting edges. We're going to use our object that we just created, that polyline that we just created, as our cutting edge. Once that's selected, go ahead and press enter. Then it's going to ask you which objects do you want trimmed. So that's going to be that feature line 2. So let's go ahead and pick the right side of that trim line. And we see now everything that was to the right of that object on the other side of that edge is now gone. It's been trimmed. And that is exactly what it is. So it's just a simple trim tool where we're able to use objects to trim our features. Go ahead and press escape or enter, and that will finish that up. We do see this time we have changes in our links for feature 2. Now, another common tool that we would use for editing feature lines is going to be our fillet tool. So back again, once we have this selected, so our contextualization tab is open, we can come here to the center option. It's going to be the 2 endpoints with that line kind of drawn through in the end between our endpoints. So go ahead and select the fillet tool or fillet tool, however you want to say it. Probably fillet. I've been saying it wrong my entire life and I'm only thinking about it right now, but hey, we all learn new things every day. But let's go ahead and zoom into 382, and we can see here we have the option to do a fillet already, or fillet. Let's go ahead and pick that corner and then just go a little bit a ways from point 382. Now we can see we have a now rounded edge. Our line, our feature no longer goes directly through point 382, but we actually have a curved edge here. And that's what the fillet tool does. I'm gonna have to look that up. All right, for those of you that are curious, I just confirmed. This tool, spelled F-I-L-L-E-T, is pronounced fillet, not fillet like F-I-L-E-T. That happens, man. Sometimes you just learn things 35 years into your life. But to focus on this exercise, let's go ahead and stay on task with that feature line located now, or selected. We're going to go ahead and select the Edit Curve tab. So that is going to be, where is it? Edit Geometry, this tool right here. So edit curve, hover over it and it'll show it to you. Then we're going to be able to, or be prompted to select a feature line curve to edit. So right here, we can select the curve that we just created with our fillet tool. Go ahead and select that, and you see it's going to select the 2 endpoints of the curve itself. And then we're going to have this edit feature line curve dialog show up. So instead of that 10-foot radius that we kept as the default when we created it, let's adjust it to 350 and then just click apply. And immediately we can see there's been a change. So because we need to zoom out, we're going to go ahead and click OK. zoom out, we can see that curve is now a lot wider. It's a much larger radius than it was previously. So if we wanted, we can click on it again. Ooh, excuse me. Go back to where it was, back in the edit curve, and select it one more time. We now see how our endpoints have extended well beyond the area of 0.382. But we're not going to need to change it again from 350, so go ahead and click cancel and then escape to make sure we're not on that tool. Now we see we still have our feature located, so in the contextualization tab, we're going to come up and we're going to hit this stepped offset tool. So go ahead and click that, and immediately we're going to be prompted to specify our offset distance. So let's go ahead and say 10, and then we're going to be asked to pick a side. So that's going to be clicked on screen. Let's go ahead and hit south of our feature line, and then we're going to be asked to give a surface depth, an elevation difference. Let's go ahead and put -10, press enter, and we now see we have a new object that we just offset created, and we can also see that it did not create a new feature here, and I think that is because we are not quite done yet. That's correct, not quite there. You're going to be asked if you want to continue running the tool. Go ahead and press enter to confirm you're done. Now we see our third feature has showed up in our viewport on our prospector tab. Let's go ahead and then select both of our feature lines, so the original one that we've been editing plus the new one we just created with the offset. We're going to type in E for the erase command, and we're going to press enter. And just like that, you see we have now erased those feature lines. So we've gone over several different ways that we can edit horizontal data for feature lines. We've looked at adding curves, we've looked at trimming, adding breaks into them, doing offsets, as well as how we can erase feature lines as a whole. So those are several common ways that you'll be editing horizontal data for feature lines going forward. And that concludes part 16. All right, this will be the start of part 17, editing elevations for feature lines. Today we're going to be going over surfaces and gradings a little bit more, and by the end of this we should know how to inspect grading and elevation information using our elevation editor, defining elevations, editing options for feature lines, and inserting high and low elevation points. All right, so let's go ahead and get drawing 0217 open. Once you have that open, the first thing we're going to do is, in our drawing, we're going to select a feature along the south line of the parcels named Park 1, Property 2, and Property 3. So let's go ahead and zoom into those locations over here. So we see we have Park 1, Property 2, Property 3. And we're going to need a feature line that's near them. So we have that feature line that we previously created in exercise 16. It says green line here now. We see it extends all the way across. Let's go ahead and just hover over that. It'll highlight, and then we can select it. And you'll know it's selected. It'll kind of get that blue halo, and the endpoints will show up. All right, so now we have the feature line contextual tab opens up over here once we've selected our feature line. Then we're going to go ahead and click the elevation editor under the edit elevations category. So let's click that. We'll have the grading elevations editor tab open up in our panorama view, or panorama vista, however you prefer to refer to it. And then here we have a little bit of information that we can review. So let's go ahead and see what we can and cannot modify. The length of this line is grayed out, implying nothing can be done with that. However, our elevation actual, if we double click there, we can make edits to it, And you see in our drawing when we select one or another row, we're selecting our two endpoints, or 2 points or vertices along this feature line. We have the ability to edit our grade back here, and our grade ahead for our starting point. So those are kind of our control points. You know, this is a beginning point. There's nothing behind it, so you can't edit the grade back. And for our end point, there's nothing ahead of it, so there's nothing that can be edited there. So those are the columns that we're able to edit in this window. For now, we're not going to make any changes, so go ahead and come back and click the green checkbox here to close out this view. Then again on our feature line contextual tab up here, under the edit elevations category, we're going to click elevations from surface. So that's going to be one of these smaller commands here. You hover over it, it should be on the bottom row, second one from the left. So if you hover over it, it'll give you the tooltip and you'll see elevations from surface. Let's go ahead and select that. That's going to open up our set elevations from surface window, and here we want to make sure our surface selected is EG. You shouldn't have any others, but in case you do, make sure you're on EG. And we're going to leave our insert intermediate grade breakpoints selected, and we're not going to select relative elevation to surface. So what these options are essentially talking about is, as we create elevations from our surface, do we want to use breakpoints, naturally identified breakpoints that we're going to insert, or do we want to use relative elevation sources for offsets, essentially? So we don't need to do any of that. Let's go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to see down here in our dialog, it's asking us to select an object. So let's go ahead and select that feature line that we were previously targeting. Excuse me. There we go. We have these naturally recommended points here based on our existing surface that we're going to highlight. You'll notice that is a, ignore that. What I was trying to say is you're going to notice where these points are showing up within each of our contours. We tend to have an option there kind of identifying a change at the ends of these objects where we previously applied that hide to it so that we maintain a flat surface in this building object. We're having points select there. So this is kind of where we're going to see each of our more necessarily identifiable changes in grade or slope. So once you have that selected, you see all this information, the circles being your breakpoints, the triangles being your endpoints. Go ahead and press enter. And then now we see we actually have those vertices with z-values added. And if you're curious about seeing those z-values, we should be able to come over here to, one moment. We can come over to see these and make sure that they're on our line in our prospector tab on our tool space. Click feature lines. We have our feature 2 down here. We can right click it, go to properties, and then click on its statistics tab in this dialog. You'll see right here we have 21 points total. 2 of them are our PI points, so those are going to be our endpoints. And then we have our 19 elevation points. So those are the points that we just generated from our elevation surface just now. So you can do that to try to confirm what we've done. All right, so we can go ahead and cancel on that. We don't need to make any changes, and we can move forward. Go ahead and hit escape to deselect that if you need to. And you see if we deselect our thing, we don't have that contextualization tab up here, but maybe we want to get into our elevation editor again, which we do, but you don't have the item selected. That's not a big deal. You can go into the modify tab and you're going to have the elevation right here again. So that's another way to get to it. So go ahead and click the elevation editor and then go ahead and select your object. And then you're going to get this dialog, this panorama view to open up. Now we actually get to see a little bit more details about all of those 19 points that were just created. You see we're not having everything kind of set to 0 anymore. We have individual links for everything, elevations of our actual station points coming across it. So that's good, along with our distance along that feature line. So those of you who have done a lot more infrastructure surveying so far in your careers, this is going to feel very familiar to you. For those of you that have not, maybe you've just seen the stakes on the ground, the lathes marked up, and it's like, why is there a number plus something that's just tracking this? This is our general arc here. This is the part of that arc for that line, the distance changing along it and going on, so on and so forth. There's a lot of different ways to mark it up, but that's kind of what we're looking at here. So again, it's simple, easy to read. Go ahead and click the green check mark without making any changes, and we will move forward. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and go to Quick Elevation Edit, and we're going to test out that. So under our Edit Elevation section, go ahead and click Quick Elevation Edit. Again, we don't have a feature selected, so we're going to need to do that. So let's move our cursor along the feature, and then note the green circles that are going to appear along those elevation points. So that circle, I'll zoom in a little bit, means it's a point. If we select this, we're talking about editing the grade, and you'll see it'll change from positive to negative based on the direction of that triangle, which in turn is referring to the direction of that slope. As of right now, we don't need to make any changes to it, so go ahead and press Escape to exit the tool. And instead of continuing to look at that one, we're going to move over and do the Edit Elevations tool next. So go ahead and click that. Again, we need to select our object, so let's get that line. And click on that. And then again, we see we have it selected here. What you do see is we have the option to edit all of these specific features of our line, these specific parameters. We also have a quick pop-up here. It's giving us the information that we currently have, what the station identifier is, what our grade in and grade outs are, and again, these are our options for editing it. So we can, by default, change the elevation, which we have it currently identified as 184.584. That can be changed without inputting an additional parameter, or again, you do another parameter to do it. So go ahead and press Escape or type in X, or type in X and press Enter to exit the tool. So once you've done that, we're going to go back into our Edit Elevations tab, and this time we're going to look at the Set Grade and Slope Between Points tool. So we're just kind of working our way through all these different tools. So to do that, again, we need to select our object. So let's do it. Actually, let's specifically select this point here as close as we can to our building. So go ahead and click here. We see we have that point recommended as our start point. So let's click that. Now we have the ability to edit that elevation. Again, we don't need to change it. We're happy with the elevation created from our surface, but it does give us the ability to quickly see it, and if we identify an error or something that needs to be changed, we could at that time. At this point, you don't have to hit Escape. You can just press Enter and accept the default or the existing elevation for that point already. So go ahead and just do that at this time. You'll see now it's going to ask us to select an endpoint. So you can go ahead and just select this endpoint here where this fence is crossing that same line. And you'll see you have different options. This was I'm pointing at my screen with my hand, that doesn't help you. This is the current endpoint between these two. However, we can select a new endpoint. And what that would do is it's going to turn all of this into a single slope or a single grade. Again, at this time, do not press Enter to accept the default because we do not want to override this existing vertices along this feature line. Go ahead and press Escape, but again, if we did hit Enter, it would override both of these grades or both of these slopes with our new definition based on our start and end point selected. This example shows one point being overridden. It could be much more if that's what we chose. All right, so again, hit Escape and let's continue. This time, let's go ahead and click Insert High and Low Elevation Points. So that will be in the middle row, the first option on the left. So click that. Again, as always, first thing we need to do is we need to select our object. So let's do so. Our object has been selected, and now we need to specify our start point. So again, we see all of our existing vertices along this feature line come available. If you look closely, you can see there's actually small shadowed symbology there, and when we hover over it or get close to it, it becomes even lighter. But where we were previously, close to this building and this holly and gum tree, let's just pick that point that was in the middle that we almost potentially overrode. So select that, and then you're immediately going to see that arrow pop up showing the direction of the existing grade. What we need to do now is we need to select an endpoint. So let's just pick another point on the feature line. It's really not relevant where, just pick one. To do that, again, with this, if you pick something that is between 2 points, it's going to result in a lot of changes for all the points in between. So it's again, now we have to specify our grade since we've picked our start and our end points. Let's go ahead and just put in 23 and press enter. Now we have to do our back grade. Let's do 15, press enter. And now we're getting the option to select a new object. What we do know is a new point has now been created. So if we select our object, we see this point did not exist before. This one at the building was here. This one in between the building and the fence was there. The point at the fence was there as well. This is a new point. So we now have a new point that has been created. At this point, instead of specifying a new start point, you can go ahead and hit escape just to exit that tool. But we've now, if we go back into our elevation editor and select our object, we should see we now have an additional point. Another way to see that evidence is if we right click on our feature line over in our prospector tab in the tool space, hit properties, come to statistics, we now see we have 20 elevation points, not 19, and a total of 22 points. So that confirms that that point was created for us. And here we do see also right here, in case you don't know the station numbers, we do know the grade back and grade ahead that we used, and we put it as -23 as our grade back and -15 as our grade ahead. Also, if you select that in the editor, it's going to highlight that point in your drawing. So right there, we've got it. Everything is confirmed. So go ahead and hit the green check mark to close that and press escape. I did have a student message me about how do I keep moving around to pan so quickly between things. There's a chance I am not telling y'all every time I press the escape key. If you look back on the video, down towards the command console, you're going to see a lot of command cancel in there, and that's what I do. It's a force of habit to make sure I'm not holding anything and dragging anything or triggering a tool unintentionally. I feel like I have that, my finger hovering over escape constantly. But yeah, that escape key to make sure I'm not in a tool, and then I use the mouse wheel on my mouse to quickly move over to the pan. You might be going into the, honestly, I'm not sure where it's located. Give me 1 second, I'll look and then come back. Okay, identified it. So instead, I'm using, keyboard and mouse commands at times or macro commands to get to it. Instead of hitting the view tab where you could switch to pan view or work with extents or orbit, I'm just using the mouse. So again, it's the escape tool I'm hitting to make sure that I'm not in a tool. The mouse wheel is being utilized to make sure that I can pan, and then again you can use the left click to select objects in different forms. So whether you have it set as default to select via a free-drawn polygon, or if you just click one point and the second point, it goes straight to rectangle. And again, right-click pulls up menus. One other quick, just like housekeeping thing here. When selecting objects, if you select it going in the right direction across your drawing, it is only going to select objects that you completely cover. So here you see I'm only selecting 650, and we have that blue shade identifying that's what's going to happen. But if I were to go to the left instead of the right, you see it's shaded in green. And when it's selecting this direction, it's going to select anything it intersects. So that's the difference. Selecting to the right is a completely within selection method, and selecting to the left is an intersects selection method. So just to keep a few things in case that wasn't made clear previously, I just want to share that bit of information because I know at times I can go kind of fast. Okay, so back to the lesson at hand for part 17. Our next option is we are going to be looking at deleting an elevation point. So go ahead and go back into the edit elevations section of whichever tab you're using, whether it's contextualization or modify, and you're going to select delete elevation point right here. So again, first we need to select our object. So let's select that line we've been working on. And like before, we see points shadowed and highlighting as we get close to them. We're going to delete that point that we just created. So this is the point that I created. If yours is in a slightly different location, that's fine. Just identify it and delete it. We've gone over methods for figuring out exactly where the points you create are. So do that, click it, and just like that, it's gone. Do know down in the command line, we are specifying individual elevation points to delete. If I were to put in A for the all command with this selected, it would delete all of the elevation points along this line. Now, in most cases, you're going to have individual instances where you need to tweak or adjust and remove kind of erroneous points individually. If you've generated elevation points, if you're working on your drawing, working on your design, and you've put all these out there and it's just, this is all wrong, the line's in the right location, but everything about it's the mistake, that's going to be when you're going to do that all command to just clean slate and let's start again, do it right the second time. What's that other phrase? Most people never have time to do something right the first time, but they sure have the ability to figure it out on round two. Something like that. I don't know. I used to get yelled at by people with colloquialisms, and I'm not very good with them. All right. Focus. So now that we've gone through and we have deleted points, let's look at inserting elevation points. So we have this kind of cluster of pine trees over here. So let's kind of zoom into that area, and we see our feature line here. So let's click Insert Elevations up here in our elevation pane, come down, and let's select our object. And now we see all of our existing points have highlighted large green circles on them. And we have this moving small one. This is going to be where we're looking at creating a new station point. So let's go ahead and put it as an intersect to this contour line. Again, if you're not snapping, you can come down here and open up, oh, not that one, here we go. Your snapping options and make sure you have whatever snapping need you want turned on. So I've done that, and then I'm going to go ahead and click this point here. Now I have a larger point that's been created, and we're going to go ahead and put in 190 as its elevation point. I was close to the contour line, but not right on it, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's set to 190. Now that it's created, you know what we can do. We can come back in here on our feature line, go into those properties, and now we have yet again another point created. We deleted one, so we went back down to 19, and now we just re-inserted a new one, so 20. So again, that's done. We don't need to insert any additional points, so just go ahead and press Enter to close out the command, or Escape, whichever you prefer. And we'll hit our elevation editor, and we'll go back and check out that feature line, and we can see where it was created right here. So 190 feet exactly. I should have grabbed that in the wrong spot. highlighting our point for us. So again, quick, easy ways to check. Go ahead and hit that green arrow to close that view. We don't need to make any additional changes. And with that, we have completed part 17, editing elevations for feature lines. Go ahead and close your drawing. This is the start of part 18, working with objects on the same site. During this exercise, we're going to be going over how feature lines relate to each other when they are within the same site or within different sites. We're going to be working on creating new feature lines on our existing surface site or survey site, and then also, again, how we're going to interact with different pieces of that site. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0218. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to that line we've been previously working on and other parts all around Park 1, Property 2, and Property 3. And we're going to go ahead and select that feature line. So let's do so, and then up here we have our contextual tab open up. Underneath modify, we're going to want to go ahead and hit the expand button. So just where it says modify, hit that white down arrow. And then we're going to go ahead and hit move to site. It's going to open up the move to site dialog, and we're going to see we have options for which site do we want it on, our development or our survey site. We're going to want to make sure it's set to development and not survey. And then we're going to make sure that our feature line is selected. We see that it is here. It's highlighted in blue down here as well. Once that's done, go ahead and click OK, and that will move our feature site or our feature line to our development site. So make sure you still have that point select or that feature selected, and then we're going to go ahead and go into our elevation editor, which we've gone over previously, and that's going to open up this panorama view. And we're going to see these 2 points here you can tell by their symbologies. They're different points that we didn't have in our previous exercises. So if we move this out of the way, again, if we click on them, we see it's not showing up any special symbology for them, except these kind of like little gray circles. It's not like before where we have this large obvious green one. So we're going to look for those little gray circles. Again, it's harder to see them. And if you're not able to identify them just by looking, if you have that point selected, you can come up here, hit the green cube inside the window, and that's going to zoom to that point. So it'll get you a little bit closer to what you're looking for. So again, we see we have those in there. These were created by crossing feature lines. They can't be edited in here, so as far as their actual elevations, because again, it's utilizing the surface that exists on our site to create those points. So that's all that is. Go ahead and hit the green check arrow to close that. Then again, make sure we still have our feature line selected. Then we're going to go back into that modify drop down, and we're going to hit move to site again, and this time we're going to move it to our other site. So instead of staying in development, we're going to move it over to our we're going to remove it from all of our sites. So we're not going to put it in survey site, we're going to put it into none, so it won't be associated to a site. So go to none, click OK, go ahead and hit that elevation editor again if the feature line is selected. You see those 2 points that were created, they're no longer in here. So again, kind of what I was referring to before, what that's saying is that those points that were created is because when that feature line moves to a new site, it's going to have interactions with other features in that site. So it's going to need to create those station points in order to make sure we don't have errors in our site or blanking on the word here. Discrepancies. Discrepancies is the word I'm looking for. So make sure we don't have discrepancies between or among our features within a survey site. So again, that's great. We've seen that. They've been removed now. Go ahead and click that green check to close that panorama view. So one more time, we're going to go ahead and with our feature line selected, click on modify, go to move site. This time we will make sure that we put it into our survey site. So in the destination site drop down in your move to site dialog, make sure you select survey site, make sure your feature line is selected here, and then go ahead and click OK. Okay, so once we've done that, we need to click back over here to our home tab, and then we are going to need to go over to our our create design panel. So click on home, come over to create design panel, and then under feature line we're going to go ahead and click create feature line. We're going to have this dialog pop up. We're going to want to make sure that our site is going to be set to our survey site. And then after that, we're going to be able to leave all of our other defaults for the name and styles. So go ahead and press OK. And then we're going to need, first thing, to select a starting point. So let's go ahead and click a point that's kind of between points 646 and that feature line that's along the south line of the parcel named property 2. So we can kind of, let me identify exactly where I'm asking you to do it real quick. There we go. Here's 646, here's a feature line. We just need to kind of select a point in here somewhere. So let's go ahead and just click here. I don't want it select snapped anything. So now we need to put in a starting elevation. We're going to go ahead and press 200 as our starting elevation. And then we're going to need to select a point a little bit south of that 12-inch gum tree that we see here. So again, we can snap to this fence line if we want, but again, it's not necessary. We just need to make sure that it either snaps or crosses over it. So go ahead, click here, call that good. And then this time we're going to put our grade at 150. And then for the next part, go ahead and just press enter, and that's going to end the command. Other option would have been to hit escape. One thing to point out, I say hit escape a lot of times, and what we're doing here is we're creating a polyline or segments at a time. If you hit escape before you were able to get that first line drawn where it's shown, it wouldn't draw anything for you if that's not obvious. Just to make sure that you're aware of that. Okay, anyways, we've drawn our line. We see it intersects our existing feature line. The line we drew was in our survey site. This feature line is supposed to be in our survey site. So what do you think is going to exist right here at this intersection? Well, easiest way to find out, go back to your Modify tab, click Elevation Editor, click on our original feature line, and lo and behold, look at that. We have an automatically a linked station point that's created from that intersection. So it's going to be there. If it's too big to kind of see it here, you can do the same thing, and instead of selecting our previous one, we can select the line we just created. We only created 2 points with a single grade along the whole thing. That intersection is going to have a point right there created as well. So again, we get to see how when we work with survey sites, it ensures that there is integrity between our different features within that site to help eliminate discrepancies, or in some cases quickly identify some of those discrepancies. So go ahead and hit that green check mark in the panorama view, close that. And then one last thing, we see how these have linked together. We've talked a little bit about that. So what we can do again is we can go back to, my mind's blanking, one moment. We want to go back to moving these to a different site. So let's select our original feature line again, and that's going to open up the, I have multiple selected, so click that feature line. We're going to go back to modify, we're going to move to site one last time, and this time we want to send it back to the none site, so we want to remove it from all sites. And again, just to really belabor the point here, we now see that that point for that intersection is no longer listed as a station. If we do the same thing and, excuse me, select our other point or our other line and go to the elevation editor, you'll see that it's not there as well. So they've been again removed from it. So when we have these points, these elevation points kind of automatically generate to create relationships or to respect the relationships between our features in a site. It doesn't just work or doesn't just do this whenever we move an object to respect a surface that's assigned to a site, but it also creates those relationships or those respects between features that we create even on the go in those sites. So it's again, it's a kind of a robust way of making sure we have that integrity in our data and between our objects all at once. So again, that's how we can make our objects work on the same site. We've learned how we can move features to and from sites, and we know how objects are going to interact with each other when they're part of the same site. And that concludes part 18. Alright, this is part 19, creating and modifying sites. So during this part, we're going to learn how we can create sites and then how we can also move and copy feature lines to different sites. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up drawing 0 to 19 in Civil 3D. Then in our Prospector tab in the tool space, we're going to come over to Sites. I'm going to go ahead and right click on it and select New to open up the Site Properties Site dialog. So we're going to change the name of this site to Migrate. And at that point, we don't need to add any descriptions, but we can take a look at the 3D geometry options just to kind of see what some of these default settings are. So, our site display mode is going to be based on elevations. Again, if we have a site elevation, we can set that here. If there's a curve tessellation that we need to define, or the mid-ordinate distance of that curve tessellation, we can put it in there. And then again, just some construction geometry options. If we want to set predefined layers for them, we can. No need to do anything there though. We can click over to numbering. We can see here our next automatic area counters and our next manual area counters. Whenever we're generating parcels in our site, it's going to be a 1 counter. And if you're wondering what exactly that is, you remember in previous parts when we created these parcels here during our creating parcels exercise, you see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the numbering that we're referring to here whenever it automatically creates those. So they can be changed or edited as needed. So again, we don't need to change anything though, so go ahead and click Apply and OK. That will close the dialog. If we expand sites over here, we'll see we have that migrate site. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our feature line that we've been working with down here along Park 1, Property 2, Property 3. We're going to select it, and then when our contextual tab opens up, we're going to come down to Modify, and instead of moving to site this time, we're going to copy it to a site. So let's go ahead and select our migrate site that we just created as the location to copy this to, and then let's press OK. Okay, so now we've copied it over, not we've moved it. So something that we should be able to do when we go into our sites is, one second. So what does that mean that we've actually copied it? Have we made a copy of it, or have we just made a reference to it in multiple locations? So let's go into that a little bit. So if we click on feature lines in our Prospector tab, we see there's only one feature line located here. So that means we didn't actually create a duplicate of that feature line, but there is something else that we did as far as referencing is concerned. So we can go ahead and right click this feature and hit select. That's going to confirm to us that we are talking about this line that we just saw. And we can escape to get off of that, but then let's go into our sites. So expand sites, and then expand and migrate. If we hit feature lines, we see that feature line is in our site. But if we expand our survey site here, and we click feature lines as well, we see it's also located there. So now what we did when we actually copied this is we copied a relationship to this object into multiple sites. So it's no longer just existing as none or into one site. It's not been duplicated, and we have a what you could traditionally might think of when we say copy, but a reference, a copied reference to this object over, so that it can interact as necessary as needed with those sites. So go ahead and hit escape to deselect everything there. And what I want us to do is we're going to look at actually erasing a site or this feature line. So when we're in our migrate site under feature lines and we click on this feature, we can hit right click and select. But if we then type in E to activate our erase command, we can see that line still exists there, but it's no longer in our site, in our migrate site. It does still exist in our survey site, and it does still exist as an object. So again, if we erase things while they're selected within a site, it's only going to be impacting it in relation to that site, as if we were to come here, right click, select, and then again press E for erase and click that, we would then see that we no longer have a unassigned feature line. We don't have our migrate feature line, and it's been removed. So that object, while exists still in one site down here because we put it in our survey site, it's no longer an unassigned feature or a migrate feature. All right. And then because we don't need it anymore for this exercise, we're going to go over just really quick how do you get rid of a site altogether. So I do want to select this real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and put it back into, or copy it back into the none site. So now we see it's located in both. Then I want to take my feature line that is in my survey site, make sure it's the only one that I have selected. I'm going to modify, and I'm going to move it back up to my migrate site. So I have a feature line now referenced in my migrate site, not in my survey site, and also that object in my ungrouped category. So let's see what happens if we now delete a site. So instead of removing individual reference features to it, we're going to right click on our site, right click on migrate, and we're going to hit delete. We're going to get this pop up, and we're going to go ahead and click yes to accept that we do want to delete it. Now, obviously we don't have a migrate site with that feature line in it, but we still see our feature line exists in that none category. So the object itself has not been deleted, but that site and any references to that site are now gone. And if we still had this feature in other sites, when we delete a site that has features that are shared or objects that are shared between sites, they won't be deleted either. So think of it from a data standpoint, kind of as views that exist. There's an object that exists in itself. That's the base object. That's the source information, and then we kind of create these views on our sites. These are our other databases where we have all these different views for different purposes, and that's what those sites kind of serve as. And when we see objects in those sites, what they serve as well. So it's a fun blend. I imagine a lot of engineers that don't know much about GIS or data management, computer science, might not kind of see it that way, but at the base of it, people who created this CAD technology, that's what they were, and these are ways that they present it to this profession. All right, with that concludes part 19, creating and modifying sites. Thank you. All right, this is part 20, creating grading groups. And that's exactly what we're going to be looking to learn how to do during this part, is create and modify grading groups. So if you haven't already, go ahead and open up Drawing 0220. And then on our Home tab, let's go ahead and go into the Create Design panel. And then let's go to Grading, and then we're going to select Create Grading Group. You're going to have the Create Grading Group dialog open up. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hit this checkbox for automatic surface creation. But then we can uncheck the Use Group Name selection. Then we're going to make sure our surface style is set to Contours 1 and 5 foot design. Our tessellation spacing can stay as 10. Our tessellation angles can stay as 3 degrees. And then we are going to select the volume base surface here, and we're going to make sure it's set to EG. So once you've got all of those settings set, go ahead and click OK. Alright, and that'll open up now the Create Surface dialog itself. And what we're going to do is change this name. Go from the default name and set it to Grading. Once it's done, we can just take a look at these. We could open this up. We could set a description if we hadn't in the previous layer, previous dialog. We can review our styles if we need, and then again, our render materials, we'll just leave it defaulted as by layer. Do make sure that your type surface is set to a 10 surface, and that your surface layer is set to C topo. Alright, once that is done, you can go ahead and click OK. And now, just to confirm that everything worked, in our Prospector tab of Toolspace, we can expand surfaces, and then we can see we do have our grading group right here. So we see grading listed as one of our surfaces, because you do notice after we had created that initial grading group, we had that dialog to create a new surface, and that's exactly what we have here. So this now is our new grading group. It's our new surface to honor that. Again, you can go into the surface properties if you'd like. You'll be able to see on the information tab, it's got the name that we set. We didn't use a description, our default styles for the surface and the rendering. And then again, just our other tabs as we've seen on previous surface exercises. So you can go ahead and click cancel there, and just like that, we now have a surface in order to show us our different grading groups, or to organize our grades together. Alright, that completes part 20. Alright, this is part 21, creating grading with grading creation tools. So during this part, we're going to be going over the grading creation tools. We're going to figure out how we can create and edit grading tools using our create infill tool, and then how to edit grading using grips. So again, as always, if you have not already, go ahead and open up Drawing 0221. Then over here in our Prospector tab, we're going to go ahead and open up our surfaces. So we see we have our EG surface, so let's expand that, and let's expand our definitions. And then once we have our definitions expanded, we're going to want to go immediately to our boundary categories. So go ahead and select boundary. And we see we have houses listed as a boundary down here. So let's go ahead and click that, and we're going to right click boundary or houses, and then we're going to delete them. We're going to go ahead and remove those from our drawing. So again, we see now there are no more boundary definitions. We have this yellow pop-up implying that we're going to need to do some regeneration. So we can either type the regen tool out in our command, or we can right click our EG surface and we can hit rebuild. So let's go ahead and do that since we're here. We're going to see we get these errors showing up. Again, this is going to be because we have break line issues from where we just deleted those houses. So let's not address any of that at this time and go ahead and click the green check mark. So with that done, we're no longer having warning labels and errors showing up. Let's get into some actual creations here. So first thing we're going to do on the Home tab, and then the Create Design section, let's go into Grading, and then we're going to hit Grading Creation Tools. That's going to give us this dialog, or this toolbar that's going to show up, the Grading Creation Tools toolbar. So the first thing we're going to do is set our grading group. So that's an option right here for us. So let's click Set Grading Group, and it's going to ask us again what site we want. We're going to want to use grading. And then what's our group name going to be? So at this point, we're going to go ahead and click the create icon here. So let's create a grading group and have a window very similar to what we saw before. The name for this one, we're going to set it to be basin. We can leave the description blank. We want to make sure we have the automatic surface creation checked. We do want to hit the check mark for using the group name. Then we can leave our default contour 1 and 5 foot design style, as well as all of our tessellation information. And we do not need to check the volume base surface dialog. So go ahead and click OK. And then you see, just like before, it's automatically going to want to create a surface to go with that. We're going to leave it all of our defaults. We don't need to change the name this time. So go ahead and click OK. And then back when we're at the Select Grading Group dialog, we see our group name is going to be set to basin. That's exactly what we want. Go ahead and click OK. Now we need to work on a target surface for our grading creation tool. Where are we actually going to be conducting this work? So let's click that target surface, and we'll get this Select Surface dialog opening up. And I'm sure you can guess, we're going to leave it at EG like we always do. We're going to go ahead and click OK. So the edits we're going to make now first are going to be to our EG surface. So then in the toolbar, let's hit our Set Grading Layer. That's the next option, the third one on the left. And then we're going to make sure that we have the correct layer. So we want to have C Topo Grad as our default layer. Go ahead and click OK. Now we want to work on our grade type. We're going to work on grading to relative elevation right here. So that's going to be the selection we have. So the difference between elevation and relative elevation is essentially interpolation. So wherever we might select points, it's going to be relative to the data around us. That's all it is, so that we don't have to be locked into an existing side shot or topo shot that was done. So let's go ahead and zoom in down here, kind of to the southwest corner. We have this nice kind of green contour line, or this feature. Zoom in around that. Then on our toolbar, we're going to finally come into our create option. And we're going to open up this drop-down menu, and we're going to make sure we have create grading turned on. That's going to automatically activate the tool. And now, after we've done all of that prep work, make sure our settings, our surfaces, everything were correct, we're going to get into the process of creating grades. So let's select this feature, which is supposed to represent a basin. And the first thing it's going to do, it's going to ask us to input or to select the grading site. So it's been selected. We can go ahead and kind of click somewhere here in the center as a mid site within our feature. And then just ask, do we want to apply it to the entire length? The default is yes. Let's go ahead and hit enter to accept that default. Now we need to set our relative elevation. Well, it's a basin, so let's do -3. Let's depress it a little bit. And then again, for our format, if we want to do grade or slope, we're going to leave it on slope. Go ahead and hit enter. That wants to know what our slope's going to be. So we're going to do a 3:1 slope. So go ahead and put in that. It can go so fast sometimes, and other times I can't find the number 3 on my keyboard. Such is life. And again, go ahead, press enter. And we see all of these lines be generated automatically to represent our new feature, or our basin. Now what we're going to do is we want to create an infill. So we just did create grading before from our grade creations toolbar. Now let's go down to create infill. Again, we can kind of pick around the same spot inside this area. So let's click that, and then we can go ahead and press enter. And we see we have some additional lines being drawn in for our infill. Now we need to create our grade to surface. So we've done our infill, we've done it for our relative elevation. Now let's move on to grade to surface. Go ahead and select that drop down from your grade creation tools, adjust that setting, and then we're going to go ahead and go back to grade creation tools, or create grading. So let's go ahead and select that. We're going to need to select our basin again as our feature. We're going to have to pick our site, and this time we're going to pick outside of our site. So we're not going interior, but now exterior. So go ahead and select a site, and it's going to ask apply it to the total length. Again, we're going to go ahead and press yes as the default option. We're going to use slope as our cutting format this time. And then for that slope, we're going to go ahead and put in a value of 5:1. So once you've got that in there, go ahead and press enter. And then for your fill format, go ahead and press enter to accept our default of slope. And once again, we're going to maintain our fill to go with our cut. So 5:1. Go ahead and press enter, and now we see we have all of this exterior grade to surface slope created for us. Then we want to go ahead and take a look at our grading editor. So that is going to be again on our toolbar. So what we'll do now is on our grading creation tools, we're going to select the grading editor. So it should be the green circle with the pencil. If your icon is different, you might just be running a different version of Civil 3D. So go ahead and select the grading editor. And then when prompted to, we're going to have to come in and we want to make sure we select that grade. So we'll kind of go here towards the middle section, go ahead and click there. And you're going to get this panorama view to open up. So we can kind of review some of our settings here. We see our relative elevation is -3. For our slope projection, again, its format is slope, and it's at that 3:1 slope that we defined previously. So this is kind of just showing us all of our grade to relative elevation settings that we applied previously. So we can go ahead and hit that green check mark and close that now that we've reviewed our settings. So let's zoom out from this area and come back up to where we've been working a lot recently. So parcels 1, 2, and 3. So once we're up here again on that in our grading creation toolbar, we're going to go ahead and select it to create a new grading group. So let's click that, and this time we're going to be naming it again grading. We're going to keep it within basin, but we're going to click to create a grading group. So we're going to kind of deviate from basin here. So for the name, let's change it to properties 2 to 3. Kind of be clear where we're working. Again, we can leave all these default settings because we're building it off of basin and everything that we did previously was good. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And again, we're going to have to create that new surface to go with this group. All of our defaults are going to be good, so go ahead and click OK again. And then now inside the Select Grading Group dialog, we can click OK if your group name is set to prop 2 to 3. So we now have that, and we're going to be able to select our grading group on our grade creation tools. So let's, excuse me, we're not changing the surface here. We're able to just go ahead and click that one more time. We see that our select grading group is set to grading and group name property 2 to 3. So go ahead, click OK. We see that surface down here. So we're good there. Let's go ahead and change on our grading creation tools, grade to surface, and set it to, or actually make sure it's set to grade to surface as our grading criteria. Then we're going to go ahead, come into our creation tools, make sure we're selecting create grading. And we're going to get this error first thing. It's going to say that a target surface needs to be selected before you can create the grading. We didn't have anything selected, so we're going to have to click OK. And then we're going to make sure we're set to the EG surface, not basin. Once that's done, go ahead and click OK. And then go back one more time and let's do create grading. We now have the option to select a feature. We're going to take that line that we've been working with previously, but you see there's some break lines in it, and this one actually is trimmed and it only exists between properties 2 and 3, hence the name we chose for our grade group. So select that, and then it's going to ask us again to select our grading site, our grading side. So we're good. Go ahead and press enter. Oh, excuse me. What am I doing here? Pardon me. This is asking us not our grading site, our grading side. So it wants us to define which side of this line are we going to be grading to. Well, our properties are up here, so I think it should be obvious to all of us that we need to grade away from the properties. So let's select a point that's going to be outside of that. So click south of that line. Once you've done so, you're going to be asked if you apply it to the entire length of the line. Go ahead and hit yes as your default. Then we're going to pick slope as our grading format. And then we're going to do a 2 to 1 cut slope. Then for our fill, again, we're going to leave it as slope again. Press enter, and we're going to fill at a 4 to 1 slope ratio. So now we see we have this new surface, this new grade showing up at the edge of this property, where we're going to need to make adjustments and where earthwork's going to need to be conducted to match the criteria of our project. This is going to be something that's pretty common in subdivision developments, especially in Texas with the flood, or coastal Texas with all the floodplains out here and the high risk of flooding. So new subdivisions, they're going to get built up in order to move those home sites outside from flooding risk. And there's a lot that goes into that. It's not as simple as just bringing in earth and making it higher, because that offsets water. Where's that water go? But I digress. When we bring in that earth, we can't, or developers, as much as they may want to, they can't just bring it in and just say, okay, I'm filling here, stop. You got a new rectangle of earth that exists. It would all wash away. It's going to degrade over time. It's a safety hazard. There's 1.5 million reasons why you don't do that. So you have to do the earthwork to kind of slope away, especially if you're not trying to build a retention wall to hold that new earth in place. And this is a very quick and effective way to kind of work on some of those, or start working on some of those calculations to identify what's going to be needed. And that's what our cut and infill data does too. There's volumetrics that are going to be assigned to all of these grade groups based on the surfaces that they're built from, to let us know, okay, well, if we want this slope along this line, how much of this needs to get cut out to match that slope, and how much earth do we need to bring in? And that's where we kind of did some of our surface, our volumetric exercises earlier, kind of looking at that ideal. And I think it's something that's just useful for every single person to understand the ideal of cut and fill, whether you're building a whole property site or you're just doing some garden work yourself. Some of the things that you're going to learn here, you'll learn how it can be applied, kind of micro to your life and your existence, not just your work. So anyways, I'm just rambling here because I think it's interesting and important all the same. So back to where we are, we can go ahead and select our features. So now that we have this new grading groups done, let's go ahead and select it. I'm not. There we go. And then we need to now again select a grading side. This time we're going to pick the top side. So again, apply it to the entire length. We're going to say yes. And then for the cut format, we're actually going to go with grade, not slope. So we're going to have to put in a percent grade. What we want is we want 0. We don't want there to be any grade on that side at all. We want it to be, flat. This is a level yard here. We're not worried about drainage or other formats like that. Our fill format, again, it's going to be G for grade. And instead of the defaulted 25% fill, we're going to go with 0. Press enter. And then when asked to select a surface, press escape to end the selection process. You'll see this red diamond that showed up here. You can go ahead and select that red diamond kind of next to 0.646. Zoom out if you need to. And you see this whole new surface, or this area that was just created that we did, because we need all of this to be 0. So that's kind of what we just created. You're not getting those lines because we're not actually talking about doing any cutting here. What we need is all of this to kind of be removed, because we see our elevation is trending higher and higher as we move further into these properties, and we want to make sure this is a nice, relatively flat home site. But let's look at some things we can change. So instead of worrying about our home site grade, let's look back at what we did here underneath. So go ahead and press escape to deselect everything. And then let's select that green diamond from our original cut and fill on the back side of these parcels. And say we wanted to actually move this indicator, so it's kind of helping set our location. Let's grab it by this grip point, wait for it to highlight red. We're going to stretch it over. We're going to put it over kind of on this end. If we click here, we've now moved it, and we can hit escape. And if we then look at, you see there's not a lot of change there, so that didn't really make any impact. But if we come down to our original basin that we created down here, say we select this, our kind of interior feature line. Let me see if I can get it to highlight for me. There we go. If we select this line, we'll be able to see how this whole basin is selected with our cut and fill lines going in and out of it. And we have a few different markers. This red diamond is going to be what we're going to be looking for, the marker that's next to that. What I want you to do is grab that point next to the red diamond, and then we're going to drag it just kind of over here. We'll say to 0.623. Go ahead and just click a little bit past that, and you're going to see it's automatically going to regenerate. If it doesn't, you can go to to basin and then hit rebuild if it's not done automatically. But you see that, and we see this automatic restructuring of our cut and fill group, our grading group. So again, we can hit escape, and that kind of shows how on the fly you can make adjustments to some of the grading groups if you need to during your design processes, your planning phases, without having to start all over from the beginning, because these objects and what Civil 3D is offering you is interactive relationships that will allow real-time or on-the-fly adjustments to some of the surfaces and grade groups and designs that you've created. So with that kind of completes part 20, 21. Wow, we're moving through these. Again, we've gone over how we can create and edit grading objects, how to make them grading objects. We've gone over how to create grading using our infill tools, and we've looked at how we can review those grade surfaces using the grading editor, and again how we can kind of on the fly make those manual adjustments using our edit grips. All right, that concludes part 21. All right, this is a start of part 22, working with grading criteria. This is also going to be the final part for Lecture 3, Surfaces and Volumes, or three-dimensional drafting. So let's go ahead and get started. During this part, we're going to be learning, again, just about grading criteria, how we can create and modify that criteria. So go ahead and open up drawing 0 to 22 into Civil 3D. And then on the Home tab, under Create Design, go to Grading dropdowns, and then we're going to hit Create Grading, we're going to hit Grading Creation Tools. So we'll have our Grading Creation Tools toolbar pop up to us. Let's come over here to our Create section, and we're going to go ahead and hit Create New in that dropdown. Now it's going to expect us to input some new criteria definitions there. So first things first, let's go to the Criteria tab, and then our target, we're going to change it from distance, and we're going to set it to surface. All right, again, we can see some of our other features here that we're not going to change. Our projection is still going to be a cut and fill slope. Our search order is going to be cut first. And again, all of our other defaults, we don't need to make any additional changes to those at this time. But we see it's all here. Now, what happens if we were to go from surface to, say, elevation? Well, we see we would have different types of criteria that we can define for each of those. So whether, again, it's going to be our elevation projections, cut, fill, slope projections going up and down, conflict resolutions, all of this can be adjusted at this time. And these all play part, just like we saw in our previous exercise, part 21, where we were having to, for the most part, choose our defaults, but at times saying, hey, we want to do grades instead of slopes. This is going to control what you're going to see show up first. For some of the selections as you progress through creating your grading features. So with relative elevation, again, we don't have the same amount of options, and that's because it has less impact, less control. And again, distance being our final one. So you'll notice pretty quickly surface and elevation have the same criteria parameters that can be adjusted, and then relative elevation and distance are going to have the same criteria parameters as well. We don't really need to make any changes here, and at the end of it, this is really what we're here to talk about today is these criteria. So you can go ahead and hit cancel, and with that, you've now successfully completed part 21, working with grading criteria, as well as having finished the lecture 3 practicum for surfaces, volumes, or 3D drafting. So thank you. Again, feel free to send me any questions, whether it's going to be on Canvas or directly to me via email at brian.gillis@tamucc.edu. Look forward to seeing you at the next lecture lab.